Imagine an aircraft designed not for combat, not for carrying weapons, but for something far more secret and dangerous, watching an enemy that never knew it was being watched. At the height of global tension during the Cold War, two superpowers stood locked in a silent battle of technology, intelligence, and fear. The world had entered the nuclear age. A single misunderstanding between nations could lead to catastrophic consequences. Governments needed information more than ever before. They needed to know how many missiles their enemies possessed, where those missiles were located, and how quickly they could be launched. But there was a problem. Much of this information was hidden deep inside enemy territory, protected by radar systems, fighter jets, and powerful air defenses. Traditional reconnaissance aircraft simply could not fly over these regions without being detected and shot down. Yet without reliable intelligence, military leaders were forced to make decisions based on guesses and incomplete reports. The stakes were unimaginably high, and the fear of the unknown created enormous pressure inside government intelligence agencies. To solve this problem, engineers began developing an aircraft unlike anything the world had ever seen, an aircraft designed to fly so high that it would be almost impossible to intercept. Its mission was simple, but extremely dangerous. Quietly cross into enemy airspace, capture detailed photographs of secret military facilities, and return without ever being noticed. This aircraft was the legendary Lockheed U-2, one of the most secretive spy planes ever built, developed by the innovative aerospace company Lockheed Corporation. The aircraft looked unusual compared to other jets of its time, with extremely long wings that resembled those of a glider. But those wings allowed it to climb to extraordinary altitudes, far above the reach of most fighter aircraft and anti-aircraft weapons. From heights exceeding 70,000 feet, the aircraft could photograph entire military installations hundreds of miles away using powerful surveillance cameras for intelligence agencies. This technology offered something they had never truly possessed before: the ability to see inside the territory of their greatest rival. To understand why such an aircraft was necessary, we have to go back to the tense years that followed the end of World War II. After the war, the alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union quickly collapsed, replaced by deep political distrust and military rivalry. This period became known as the Cold War, a decades-long struggle for global influence between the two nuclear superpowers. Both nations began building enormous arsenals of weapons, including long-range bombers and nuclear missiles capable of destroying entire cities. Yet despite their vast intelligence networks, neither side truly knew the full extent of the other's military capabilities. American leaders feared that the Soviet Union might secretly be building massive fleets of nuclear bombers or stockpiling missiles that could strike without warning. Without reliable information, these fears grew larger and more dangerous with each passing year. Satellites had not yet been developed, and ground-based espionage inside the Soviet Union was extremely difficult and risky. The only realistic solution was to observe the Soviet military from above. This challenge eventually led to one of the most daring intelligence projects of the Cold War: the creation of a high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft capable of flying over enemy territory while remaining nearly untouchable. The aircraft that emerged from this effort, the Lockheed U-2, would go on to play a critical role in some of the most important intelligence operations of the 20th century. But its missions were incredibly dangerous, and one flight in particular would eventually spark an international crisis that shocked the world and exposed one of the most secret espionage programs ever conducted, powdering the early years of the Cold War. The rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union created one of the most dangerous geopolitical situations in human history. Both superpowers possessed nuclear weapons capable of destroying entire cities, and each side feared that the other might be secretly preparing for a massive military advantage. The problem was simple but terrifying. Neither country truly knew what the other was capable of. Intelligence agencies struggled to gather accurate information about enemy military capabilities, especially deep inside Soviet territory. American officials worried that the Soviet Union might be building huge numbers of long-range bombers or secretly constructing missile bases capable of launching nuclear strikes against the United States without reliable intelligence. Military planners were forced to make decisions based largely on speculation and incomplete reports. At the center of the American intelligence effort was the powerful agency known as the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA was responsible for gathering information about foreign governments, military developments, and strategic threats. However, during the early 1950s, the agency faced a serious obstacle. The Soviet Union was an extremely closed society, tightly controlled by its government and protected by one of the most extensive security systems in the world. Foreign spies had very limited access to sensitive military installations, and many intelligence operations inside Soviet territory were nearly impossible to conduct. This created what analysts called an intelligence gap, meaning that American leaders lacked reliable knowledge about the Soviet military. One of the most alarming fears during this period was the so-called bomber gap. Some military officials believed the Soviet Union might possess far more long-range nuclear bombers than the United States. If true, this would give the Soviets a potentially devastating strategic advantage. But without direct evidence, no one could confirm whether this fear was real or simply an exaggeration. American leaders desperately needed a way to observe Soviet military installations directly. The solution that intelligence planners proposed was bold and extremely risky. Instead of relying solely on spies or intercepted communications, they would gather information from the sky. If an aircraft could fly high enough, it might be able to cross Soviet territory undetected while photographing military bases, airfields, and missile facilities. These photographs could provide accurate intelligence that would reveal the true strength of the Soviet military. However, traditional reconnaissance aircraft could not safely perform such missions. Soviet radar systems were already capable of detecting aircraft flying at normal altitudes. Fighter jets could intercept and destroy them long before they completed their missions. Any attempt to fly a conventional aircraft over Soviet territory would almost certainly lead to it being shot down, potentially triggering an international crisis. To overcome this problem, American intelligence officials began searching for a revolutionary solution. An aircraft capable of flying at an altitude so extreme that enemy defenses could not reach it. Such an aircraft would operate near the edge of the atmosphere, far above the range of most radar systems and fighter interceptors. From this incredible height, powerful cameras could capture detailed images of strategic locations on the ground. This idea eventually led to the creation of one of the most famous reconnaissance aircraft ever built, the Lockheed U-2, designed specifically for high-altitude intelligence missions. The aircraft would become a crucial tool in gathering information about the Soviet Union. But its missions were incredibly dangerous, and every flight carried the risk of discovery. In the tense environment of the Cold War, a single mistake could trigger a political crisis between the world's two nuclear sewers. Once the decision was made to create a high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft, the project was handed to one of the most innovative aerospace companies in the United States, Lockheed Corporation. Inside the company existed a small, highly secretive engineering division known as Skunk Works. This team specialized in building experimental aircraft that pushed the limits of aviation technology. Leading the group was the legendary aerospace engineer Clarence Kelly Johnson, a man famous for designing revolutionary aircraft under tight deadlines and extreme secrecy. When intelligence officials approached him with the idea of building a spy plane capable of flying higher than any aircraft, before it, Johnson immediately understood the challenge. The aircraft would need to operate at altitudes where the air was incredibly thin, where traditional jet aircraft simply could not function efficiently. Now Johnson and his engineers began rethinking almost every aspect of aircraft design. Instead of creating a heavily armored military jet, they focused on building something much lighter and more delicate. The aircraft would need long, narrow wings to generate lift in thin air, similar to the wings of a glider. These wings would allow the aircraft to stay airborne at extreme altitudes while using relatively little engine power. The result was a unique and unusual design. The plane looked fragile compared to fighter jets, with an incredibly long wingspan and a slender body. But its appearance was deceptive. This aircraft was specifically engineered for one purpose: flying higher than almost anything else in the sky. The aircraft eventually became known as the Lockheed U-2. It was designed to reach altitudes above 70,000 feet, far higher than commercial airplanes, and well beyond the reach of most military interceptors at the time. At these heights, pilots could see the curvature of the Earth and the sky appeared almost black. However, flying at such extreme altitudes created serious challenges for pilots. The air pressure was so low that even a small cockpit leak could be fatal within seconds. To solve this problem, pilots were required to wear full pressure suits similar to those used by astronauts. The U-2 was also equipped with some of the most advanced cameras ever developed. These cameras could capture incredibly detailed photographs from miles above the ground, revealing objects as small as vehicles or aircraft parked on distant runways. Intelligence analysts could study these photographs and determine the size of military bases, count bombers parked at airfields, and even identify missile launch sites. Because the project was extremely sensitive, everything about the aircraft's development was kept secret. Flight testing took place at remote desert locations far away from major cities. Engineers and pilots working on the project were instructed not to discuss the aircraft with anyone outside the program. Even many government officials were unaware of what was being developed. By the mid-1950s, the aircraft was ready for operational missions. Intelligence agencies now possessed a revolutionary new tool that could quietly enter hostile airspace and return with information that previously seemed impossible to obtain. But no one knew how long this advantage would last. When the first operational flights of the Lockheed U-2 began, the results immediately transformed intelligence gathering during the Cold War. For years, American military planners had relied on estimates and rumors about Soviet military strength. Now, for the first time, they had the ability to see inside Soviet territory directly. From altitudes exceeding 70,000 feet, the U-2's cameras could photograph massive areas of land with remarkable clarity. Entire military complexes could be captured in a single flight. These early missions were incredibly daring, and pilots flew thousands of miles across hostile territory, often spending long hours alone in the cockpit. Each mission required careful planning. Intelligence analysts identified specific locations that needed to be photographed, such as air bases, missile testing facilities, and industrial complexes connected to weapons production. Pilots then followed predetermined routes that allowed them to capture images of these locations while avoiding heavily defended areas whenever possible. The photographs returned from these missions provided astonishing insights. Analysts discovered that many fears about Soviet military strength had been greatly exaggerated. For example, the so-called bomber gap that had worried American officials turned out to be largely inaccurate. Instead of possessing massive fleets of nuclear bombers, the Soviet Union had far fewer aircraft than many analysts had predicted. This information helped reduce some of the panic that had been growing among political and military leaders. However, the missions were still extremely dangerous. Although the aircraft flew higher than most interceptors could reach, Soviet radar systems could still detect them. Every time a U-2 entered Soviet airspace, the Soviet military attempted to track and intercept it. Fighter pilots sometimes attempted to climb high enough to reach the aircraft, but they were usually unable to get close enough to engage it. Despite these risks, the intelligence gathered from the flights was considered invaluable. Photographs revealed the locations of nuclear testing sites, missile development facilities, and strategic bomber bases. This information helped American planners better understand Soviet military capabilities and prepare appropriate defensive strategies. For several years, the program operated successfully. The U-2 flew dozens of missions across Soviet territory and other sensitive regions around the world. Each mission brought back more photographs and more intelligence. But the Soviet Union was not standing still. Engineers and military planners were working tirelessly to develop new weapons capable of reaching higher altitudes. Eventually, they would succeed. As the reconnaissance missions continued, Soviet scientists and engineers began developing new technologies specifically designed to counter high altitude. Aircraft like the Lockheed U-2, radar systems were becoming more powerful and accurate, allowing Soviet air defense networks to track aircraft flying at greater distances and higher altitudes. Even more concerning for American intelligence planners was the rapid development of advanced surface-to-air missile systems. These new missiles were designed to travel extremely fast and reach altitudes far beyond those achievable by fighter aircraft. Unlike interceptor jets, which needed to physically climb high enough to engage a target, missiles could be launched directly from the ground and guided toward intruding aircraft using radar systems. This meant that the altitude advantage that once protected the U-2 might not last forever. Despite these growing risks, reconnaissance missions continued. Intelligence agencies believed that the information gathered by the aircraft was simply too valuable to abandon. Every flight provided new data about Soviet missile programs, nuclear weapons testing, and military infrastructure. For military planners in the United States, these missions helped prevent dangerous misunderstandings about Soviet capabilities. At the same time, the political stakes surrounding the program were becoming increasingly high. If a spy plane were ever shot down over Soviet territory, the consequences could be severe. The Soviet government could use the incident as evidence that the United States was violating its airspace and conducting illegal espionage operations. Such a revelation could trigger a major diplomatic crisis between the two superpowers. Even the pilots understood the risks they were taking. Flying deep into enemy territory meant that if anything went wrong, mechanical failure, navigation errors, or enemy attack, rescue would be nearly impossible. A downed pilot would almost certainly be captured, but the missions continued because the strategic value of the information outweighed the danger. Intelligence officials hoped that the aircraft's altitude would continue protecting it from interception. But by 1960, Soviet missile technology had advanced dramatically. Soon, one mission would change everything. On May 1, 1960, a reconnaissance mission began like many others. A U-2 craft piloted by Francis Gary Powers took off for a long flight across the Soviet Union. His mission was to photograph several sensitive military installations before exiting Soviet territory and landing at a base in another country. The flight route covered thousands of miles and passed over some of the most heavily defended regions of the Soviet Union. As the aircraft crossed into Soviet airspace, radar operators quickly detected it. Soviet air defense forces began tracking the plane as it moved deeper into their territory. Fighter jets attempted to intercept it, but they could not reach its extreme altitude. However, the Soviet military now possessed a powerful new weapon: high-altitude surface-to-air missiles. Several missiles were launched toward the aircraft. One of them exploded near the U-2, severely damaging it. The aircraft lost control and began falling from the sky. Powers was forced to eject from the cockpit and parachute down to the ground below, where he was quickly captured by Soviet authorities. The incident created an immediate international crisis. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev announced that a spy plane had been shot down deep inside Soviet territory. At first, the United States government attempted to claim that the aircraft was a weather research plane that had accidentally strayed off course. However, the Soviets revealed that they had captured the pilot alive, along with parts of the aircraft and surveillance equipment. The truth could no longer be denied. The event became known as the U-2 incident, and it caused a major diplomatic confrontation between the two superpowers. A planned summit between world leaders collapsed, and tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union intensified dramatically. The secret spy plane program had finally been exposed to the world. Although the U-2 incident created a political crisis, it did not erase the enormous impact the reconnaissance program had already achieved. The missions conducted by the Lockheed U-2 had provided intelligence that fundamentally changed how governments understood their adversaries during the Cold War. The photographs captured during these flights helped clarify the true scale of Soviet military capabilities and prevented many dangerous assumptions. The success of the program also inspired new technological developments. Engineers began working on even more advanced reconnaissance aircraft capable of flying faster and higher than the U-2. One of the most famous examples was the Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird, an aircraft capable of flying at more than 3 times the speed of sound while operating at extremely high altitudes. These aircraft continued the mission of gathering intelligence from the skies while reducing the risk of interception. At the same time, another revolutionary technology was beginning to emerge: reconnaissance satellites. Instead of risking pilots and aircraft over enemy territory, satellites could orbit the Earth and capture images of military installations from space. This new capability would eventually become the primary method of strategic surveillance. Remarkably, the original U-2 aircraft never completely disappeared. Updated versions of the plane are still used today by the United States Air Force for high-altitude intelligence missions. Modern sensors allow the aircraft to collect information about electronic signals, communications networks, and environmental conditions. What began as a desperate attempt to solve an intelligence problem during the early Cold War ultimately created one of the most influential reconnaissance programs in history. The aircraft that was never meant to be seen changed the way nations gathered intelligence and helped shape global strategy for decades. As we reach the end of this story, the true significance of this aircraft becomes clear. What began as a desperate attempt to gather information during one of the most dangerous periods in human history eventually turned into one of the most influential intelligence programs ever created. During the height of the Cold War, when tension between the United States and the Soviet Union could have erupted into nuclear conflict at any moment, accurate intelligence was not just valuable light, it was essential. The development of the Lockheed U-2 gave intelligence agencies a powerful new tool to observe the world from above, revealing secrets that had previously been hidden behind borders, propaganda, and military defenses. For the first time, leaders could make decisions based on real photographic evidence rather than fear and speculation. In many ways, the aircraft helped reduce uncertainty during an era when uncertainty itself could have triggered catastrophic war. Yet the story also reminds us how fragile international stability can be. The moment a single reconnaissance flight was detected and shot down during the U-2 incident, the entire secret operation was exposed to the world. Diplomacy collapsed, global tensions increased, and the fragile trust between superpowers was pushed even closer to the breaking point.
Ow!
It was a powerful demonstration of how intelligence operations, designed to prevent surprise attacks, could themselves create international crises if discovered. But despite the controversy, the legacy of this aircraft continues even today. The technologies and strategies developed during the program shaped the future of surveillance and reconnaissance. They inspired the creation of faster and more advanced aircraft, such as the legendary Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird, and eventually contributed to the rise of satellite intelligence systems that now monitor activity across the entire planet. Yet even after decades of technological progress, modern versions of the U-2 are still flying missions for the United States Air Force, proving that the design created in secrecy during the 1950s remains one of the most remarkable aircraft concepts ever built. Stories like this reveal a hidden side of history, one that rarely appears in textbooks. Behind the headlines of world events are secret operations, experimental technologies, and individuals who quietly shaped the course of global politics from the shadows. The aircraft that was never meant to be seen ultimately became one of the most famous spy planes ever built, and its missions helped define the intelligence battle that shaped the modern world.
And if you enjoy uncovering stories like this, the hidden missions, secret military technologies, and operations that almost changed history, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here on Strategic Archive, we explore the untold stories behind the world's most secret military projects, mysterious operations, and historical moments that could have altered the course of history. If you found this story fascinating, leave a like on the video and let us know in the comments which secret operation or military mystery you want to see next. Because sometimes the most important events in history are the ones that were never supposed to be discovered.